Matt Schauf and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here to give you the top 5 wide receivers for the Week 2 main slate in DFS this week. Jared, let's jump right in. Who's the first guy up?
Yeah, we're betting on a bounce back from the Bengals passing game this week and playing Jamar Chase. $7,900 on DraftKings. That's an awesome price. He's $8,400 on FanDuel. That's a nice price. Chase is a top 10 wide receiver value for us on both sides. The Ravens are going to be without cornerback Marlon Humphrey and safety Marcus Williams in that game, improving Chase's matchup. And Chase already, he has scored and or tallied 125 plus yards in 4 of his 5 career games against this Ravens defense.
Yeah, I think the Ravens can feel when Jamar Chase comes into town or when they land in Cincinnati and they just get the shakes. If you look at his numbers last week, they sucked. 5 catches for 39 yards, but they also represented 37.5% of Joe Burrow's total completions and nearly 50% of the team's passing yards. So you love those shares. And like you said, we're expecting this pass offense to simply bounce back. Next wide receiver up on this list, who you got?
Yeah, Mike Williams on another passing game we're expecting to bounce back. The Chargers offense put up plenty of points in week 1, but it was a lot from the ground game. I think it's going to flip back to the passing game this Sunday against the Titans defense that we always like to attack through the air. Tough run defense, poor pass defense. Austin Eckler looking iffy for this game. That should only push the Chargers more towards the pass. I think Mike Williams had a classic Mike Williams game last week, even briefly left to get checked for an injury, as Mike Williams often does. But we mentioned last week on the DFS shows that Chris Olave was a target for us because we like to especially attack the Titans defense on deep balls. The Titans allowed the most fantasy points on passes 20 plus yards downfield to wide receivers last year. In week 1, they allowed the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers on deep balls. I still think Mike Williams is, the primary deep threat for this Chargers passing game.
Yeah, I'm targeting this Chargers pass offense this week. I think that we get a big rebound the other way in passing production versus what we saw from them in week 1. I've been doing sleeper drafts, daily drafts, and getting Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen very easily on there for that PPR format. Number 3 wide receiver on DFS this week. What do you got?
Yeah, Deebo Samuel, who is probably my favorite play at wide receiver this week. $5,600 on DraftKings, $6,900 on FanDuel. Week 1 for the Niners was a Brandon Ayuk game, but Deebo still got 7 targets for a 24% target share. Also got 2 carries. I think, that's going to remain part of his fantasy profile, even with Christian McCaffrey in town. And this looks like a Deebo spot to me, more so than Ayuk. A few smart fantasy analysts have pointed out Brandon Ayuk tends to produce better against defenses that play more man coverage. Deebo tends to produce better against defenses that play more zone. The Rams are a zone heavy defense. And I think that explains why Deebo has crushed the Rams in their last 4 meetings. Here are Deebo's fantasy totals in his last 4 games against the Rams. 133 total yards and 2 touchdowns, 140 yards, 1 touchdown, 98 total yards, 1 touchdown, 117 yards and 1 touchdown. We'll take any of those lines from Deebo this week.
Absolutely. And on my FFPC main event team, I will gladly take big numbers from him and lots of targets for Devontae Adams, who will be going without Jacoby Myers. So fingers crossed for all those things. If you've got a wide receiver that you love in DFS this week that we don't name in this show, let us know in the comments below. Love to hear from you. Jared, let's roll on, though, with a 4th wide receiver, almost to the end of the top 5. Who else you got?
Yeah, cheaper play here. Jahan Dotson. He's $4,900 on DraftKings. He's $6,100 on FanDuel. Kind of underwhelmed in the opener, like the Commanders passing game in general. 5 catches for 40 yards for Dotson. But he saw 7 targets. That was a 22.6% target share. The routes were there. He's a full-time player in this passing game, as we expected. I'm expecting Pat Surtain, the Broncos all-pro corner, to spend most of Sunday's game on Terry McLaurin. If that's the case, then Dotson's going to see Damari Mathis in primary coverage. Mathis was the guy that Jacoby Myers smoked for a massive game in week 1. Mathis in coverage gave up 8 catches for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. If Dotson is, seeing Mathis for most of his routes on Sunday, I think he's in for a big game.
Yeah, I would be curious to see if they actually have Surtain travel with McLaurin or if they're just like, well, both of these guys are tough. And it's different than the Raiders matchup. So certainly a good spot for Jahan Dotson. And is he a winner in our dollars per point, especially with the lower salary versus the other guys you named, I imagine?
Yes. On DraftKings, He comes in as a top 5 value play at wide receiver. He's a bit lower. He's not as big a value on FanDuel at 6,100, but he's still, near the top of our value rankings.
Yeah, and we'll talk on our DraftKings and FanDuel podcasts about those specific values on each site. You can find dollars per point anytime for every player on the slate, right in our rankings on DraftSharks.com, as well as in the lineup generator. And that, of course, the generator lets you sort by player salary, by value, meaning dollars per point, by ceiling and floor projections to see who might have the highest ceiling in a given week, and then generate lineups to start your DFS play for the week. Jared, last guy.
Another cheaper play, Nico Collins from this Texans offense that surprised me how they played in week 1. The Texans in the opener were 9th in the league in pass rate over expected. So yeah, I know they played behind from Baltimore throughout. That was part of the reason CJ Stroud threw it 44 times, but again, based on that pass rate over expected, it was kind of by design. They kind of came out wanting to throw the ball in that game. The Texans were 3rd in neutral pace in week 1. So they were a fast-paced, pass-leaning offense. If that's the case, there's going to be fantasy value to be had from this passing game. And I think Nico Collins, as we expected all summer, was the number 1 wide receiver here. Led Houston with 11 targets. That was a 25% target share. A lot of those targets came downfield. Nico Collins was 3rd in the entire league in air yards in week 1. So he's looking like an exciting player, especially at this type of price tag in DFS. And he gets this Colts secondary, which I think, came into the season looking like one we're going to want to attack. And, nothing they did against the Jags in week 1 has me, thinking otherwise.
Yeah, and this is Robert Woods was right with Nico Collins in usage and targets last week, but the depth of target significantly favors Nico Collins, who's the downfield guy. So this is like the bargain bin, store brand version of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, where they might be duking it out for targets, but Nico Collins is going to be the higher upside guy. And we'll see what this offense does going forward. If they really do want to pass more than we would have guessed, if they continue to be a higher pace, and even if they don't necessarily lean as heavily toward the pass as last week, just playing at that faster pace is going to create opportunities for everybody.
Yeah, the Colts, by the way, played at a fast pace too in week 1. So this game in general, I think, has more point potential than, even the Vegas line. I think the over-under is under 40 points. I think it has potential to go way over that.
And if you're still not comfy enough to put Nico Collins into a lineup for your, full season lineup setting teams, this is a spot to go ahead and put him in a lineup. You can benefit if he does go off, even if you left him on the bench otherwise. So hit the lineup generator on DraftSharks.com, get your lineup started, check our rankings. We're there to help you. You can also find articles for both cash and tournament play from Jared for DraftKings, from our pal Kevin for FanDuel. And if you wind up winning big, let us know. We want to hear from you. You can tweet at us at DraftSharks on X, or let us know in the DraftSharks Discord. We'd love to celebrate that with you.